15 billion miles from where you are sitting. A machine built in the 1970s opened its mouth to speak, and what came out was gibberish. Not silence. Silence would have been easier. Silence has 100 ordinary explanations. This was worse. The spacecraft was still transmitting, still reaching across the void, still sending its signal home the way it had every single day for almost half a century. But the message had stopped making sense. Where there should have been the neat, structured stream of data that engineers had read like a heartbeat since before most of them were born, there was now a single pattern, repeating, meaningless, stuck. A machine that had crossed into the space between the stars was suddenly babbling, and the people on the other end, at a facility in California, felt something cold settle in the room, because this was Voyager 1, the most distant human-made object in the history of the species, the farthest we have ever reached, and it sounded, for all the world, like it was dying. Stay with me, because what those engineers did next, across a distance so vast it breaks the mind to hold it, is one of the most quietly astonishing things human beings have ever pulled off. To understand the fear in that room, you have to understand what Voyager 1 is, and how impossibly far away it has gone. It launched in 1977. Think about that year for a moment. The computers on board this spacecraft are less powerful than the key fob that unlocks a modern car. Its total memory is a rounding error next to the phone in your pocket. And yet this primitive, beautiful machine was flung past Jupiter, past Saturn, given a gravitational slingshot, and sent on a one-way journey out of the solar system entirely. It has been flying for over 45 years. It is now more than 15 billion miles from the sun, so far away that its signal, traveling at the speed of light, the fastest thing there is, takes around 22-23 hours to reach us. Picture that. You send a command, and you wait most of a day for it to arrive, and then most of another day for the answer to crawl back. A full conversation, one question and one reply, takes nearly 2 days. It is like shouting to someone so far away that your voice takes a day to land, and their answer takes another day to return, and the person you are shouting to is a 45-year-old machine with a dying memory, drifting alone in the dark between the stars. That is the patient, agonizing rhythm of talking to Voyager, and in November of 2023, mid-conversation, it started speaking nonsense. Here is exactly what happened, because the specifics are stranger than any vague mystery. Voyager 1 has a component called the Flight Data System. Its job is to gather the information from the spacecraft's instruments and its own engineering sensors, package it all up, and hand it to another unit that beams it back to Earth. This is the spacecraft's voice, the part that turns everything it senses into a message we can read. And in November 2023, that voice broke. The data coming home stopped containing any usable information. Instead, the engineers saw a repeating pattern of ones and zeros, locked, stuck, as if a record had caught in a groove and would not move on. The spacecraft, by every other sign, was alive. It was receiving commands. It was still pointed the right way. Its heart was still beating, but it could no longer tell us anything about itself or the space around it. It had lost the ability to form words and sit with the position those engineers were in. They could not open it up. They could not send a technician. The nearest human hands were 15 billion miles away, and the patient could only be reached by a whisper that took a day to arrive. They had a spacecraft that was babbling, and the only tool they had was to send carefully worded messages into the dark and wait almost 2 days each time to see if anything changed. So they became detectives working the most remote crime scene in existence. Slowly, painstakingly over weeks, they tried to coax the machine into telling them what was wrong, and they made progress in a way that is genuinely clever. In March of 2024, they sent up a command, a gentle nudge, essentially asking the flight data system to send back a complete readout of its memory in a different way than usual. And when that readout finally crawled back to Earth, the team could pore over it and compare it to how the memory was supposed to look. And they found it, the culprit, a single chip, one small piece of memory hardware, responsible for storing part of the system's code and some of its data, had failed. We do not know for certain why. It may have simply worn out after 46 years of operation. It may have been struck by an energetic particle, a piece of cosmic radiation out there in interstellar space, the kind of random cruelty the universe deals to anything exposed long enough. But the effect was clear. About 3% of the flight data system's memory was gone, corrupted, unreadable. And crucially, the lost piece contained code the system needed to package its data properly. Losing it was like losing the part of your brain that assembles words into sentences. You still have everything to say, you simply can no longer say it, and the chip could not be repaired. It could not be replaced. It was broken, forever, 15 billion miles away. But here is the turn, and this is the part that should give you chills. The engineers did not give up, and they did not have a way to fix the chip, so instead they decided to do something almost outrageous. If they could not repair the broken storage, they would move the code that lived there somewhere else. They would find healthy working sections of memory elsewhere in the system, and they would relocate the lost instructions into them. Except there was a catch, a beautiful, maddening catch. No single spot in the remaining memory was big enough to hold the whole displaced chunk of code, so they had to break it into pieces. They had to take this critical software, divide it into sections, tuck each section into a different available corner of a 1970s computer, and then rewrite the code so that all these scattered pieces would still find each other and work together as one. And they had to write all of this, test it as best they could, and then transmit it across 15 billion miles of nothing, knowing that the command would take almost a full day to arrive, that any mistake could be catastrophic, and that the answer would take another day to return. In April of 2024, they sent the first piece of the fix, the code responsible for packaging up the engineering data, into the void, and then they did the only thing left to do. They waited. Nearly 2 days. A day for the signal to reach the spacecraft, a day for its reply to come home. And on the 20th of April 2024, the answer arrived. For the first time in 5 months, Voyager 1 spoke clearly. The data came back structured, readable, sensible. The engineers could once again see the health of the spacecraft, could read its heartbeat, could understand what it was telling them. It had worked. They had performed open-heart surgery on a computer built before the personal computer existed, from a distance so vast that light itself needs almost a day to cross it, by shattering its software into fragments and hiding them in the healthy corners of a dying machine, and it had worked. Over the following weeks, they sent up the rest of the fix, restoring the science instruments too, until the spacecraft was once again sending back not just news of itself, but new readings from interstellar space, the place no other machine from Earth has ever been. The voice that had broken was whole again. The babbling had stopped, and Voyager 1, that impossible 46-year-old traveler, went back to work in the dark. So when someone tells you Voyager sent home a signal that could not be explained, this is the true version, and I think it is better than any invented one. The signal that stumped them was not a message from something out there, it was the machine itself, wounded, trying to speak through a hole in its own memory, and for 5 long months no one could understand it. The mystery was real, the fear was real, and the resolution was not aliens or some cosmic riddle, but something that says more about us than any signal from the void ever could. A group of human beings refused to let go of a machine that a reasonable person would have written off decades ago. They sat with a patient they could not touch, listened to it babble, and reasoned their way to the single broken chip, and then healed it with nothing but patience and code, and a signal whispered across 15 billion miles. Voyager 1 carries a golden record, a message meant for whoever might one day find it, a small time capsule of what humanity is. But the real message of Voyager is not on that disk. It is in what happened in the spring of 2024, when the farthest thing we have ever made started to fail, and we reached across the emptiness, further than we have ever reached, and refused to let it die. It is still out there right now, still flying, still speaking, and we are still listening.